The mahogany door of their penthouse swung open with a force that made the expensive crystal chandelier tremble. Marcus Wellington strode in, designer shoes clicking against marble floors, divorce papers clutched in his perfectly manicured hand like a weapon he'd been sharpening for months. His jaw was set, his resolve absolute. 5 years of marriage, and he was done. Finished. Ready to reclaim the freedom he'd convinced himself he'd lost. But then he saw her. Sophia stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, her silhouette backlit by the golden afternoon sun. She turned slowly, and that's when his world tilted on its axis. Her hand rested protectively on the gentle swell beneath her flowing dress, a curve that hadn't been there 3 months ago when he'd stopped coming home before midnight. The divorce papers slipped from his fingers, fluttering to the floor like dying birds. "You're pregnant," he whispered, the words strangling in his throat. She nodded, her dark eyes glistening with unshed tears. 12 weeks. Marcus felt his knees weaken. This wasn't part of the plan. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not when he'd finally worked up the courage to leave, to pursue the life he thought he wanted with Victoria, his ambitious young assistant who understood his drive, his hunger for more. Victoria, who never complained about his late nights or questioned his priorities. Victoria, who wasn't standing here carrying his child, looking at him with those eyes that had once held nothing but adoration and now held only quiet devastation. The story of how they'd arrived at this moment began 5 years earlier, when Marcus Wellington was nobody special. He'd been a mid-level marketing executive with big dreams and empty pockets, working 16-hour days to make ends meet. Sophia had been a kindergarten teacher who volunteered at homeless shelters on weekends and believed that kindness was the greatest currency in the world. They'd met at a coffee shop where he'd been too distracted rehearsing a pitch to notice he'd grabbed her latte by mistake. "That's mine," she'd said, laughing as he took a sip and grimaced at the excessive sweetness. "How can you drink this? It's basically liquid candy. How can you not? Life's bitter enough without black coffee making it worse." He'd bought her a replacement drink, and they'd talked for 3 hours. She'd made him laugh for the first time in months. She'd listened to his dreams about starting his own company without the skepticism everyone else showed. When he'd walked her home that night, he'd felt something he hadn't experienced since childhood, hope that life could be more than just a relentless climb toward some undefined success. Their wedding had been small, held in her parents' backyard with string lights and wildflowers. Marcus's family had boycotted it, deeming Sophia too simple, too ordinary for their ambitious son. His mother had actually used the word, settling. But on that warm June evening, watching Sophia walk toward him in a simple white dress she'd found at a vintage shop, he'd never felt richer. The first 3 years had been beautiful in their simplicity. They'd lived in a cramped apartment where the heating barely worked, but they'd been happy. Sophia would grade papers at their tiny kitchen table while Marcus worked on business proposals, and they'd share cheap takeout while dreaming about the future. She'd believed in him when his first startup failed. She'd held him through the panic attacks when investors rejected him repeatedly. She'd worked extra hours tutoring students to help pay bills when money got tight. Then everything changed. His tech company, a social media analytics platform, suddenly took off. What started as a modest success became a phenomenon. Within 18 months, Marcus went from struggling entrepreneur to multimillionaire. They moved to the penthouse. He bought the luxury cars, the designer clothes, joined the exclusive clubs. Sophia had been uncomfortable with it all from the start. "We don't need all this," she'd said, standing in their new bedroom that was larger than their entire first apartment. "Maybe you don't, but I do. I've earned this, Sophia. I've worked for it. I know you have. I just don't want us to lose ourselves in it." But Marcus had already been losing himself, though he couldn't see it. Success became an addiction. Every milestone made him hungry for the next. Board meetings, networking events, exclusive parties where everyone spoke the language of ambition and no one asked uncomfortable questions about happiness or purpose. Sophia tried to fit into his new world, but she was like a wildflower in a room full of orchids, natural and beautiful but somehow deemed insufficient. The other wives at corporate events would discuss their renovations, their personal shoppers, their spa retreats in Bali. Sophia would try to contribute stories about her students or the community center where she still volunteered, and they'd smile politely before changing the subject. Marcus started feeling embarrassed by her simplicity, though the feeling made him hate himself even as he couldn't shake it. Victoria had entered his life during this transformation. She was everything his new world valued: ambitious, polished, hungry. She worked late because she wanted to, not because she had to. She spoke about quarterly projections and market disruption with genuine excitement. And crucially, she looked at Marcus like he was everything, like his success made him fascinating, like his money and power were proof of his worth. The affair had started 6 months ago, though Marcus had justified it as not really cheating for the first few weeks since it had been purely emotional. Just drinks after work, just conversations about business, just someone who understood him in ways Sophia no longer seemed to. By the time it became physical, he'd already rewritten their marriage in his mind, casting Sophia as the obstacle to his happiness rather than the foundation of it. He'd convinced himself the kindest thing would be a clean break. Divorce her, give her a generous settlement, let her find someone who wanted her simple life. She'd be fine, she was strong, and he'd be free to build the life he deserved with someone who matched his ambition. Except now she was pregnant. "How long have you known?" Marcus asked, his voice barely audible. 2 weeks. Sophia's hand remained on her stomach, protective and sure. "I was trying to find the right time to tell you, but you're never home anymore. And when you are, you look at me like I'm a stranger you're tired of knowing." The accuracy of her words hit him like a physical blow. "Sophia, you're here to ask for a divorce." It wasn't a question. She glanced at the papers scattered on the floor. "I've known for a while. The late nights, the distance, the way you flinch when I touch you. I'm not stupid, Marcus. You've already left. You just finally decided to make it official." He wanted to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. She deserved better than his lies. "There's someone else," she continued, her voice remarkably steady. "Isn't there?" Marcus closed his eyes. Yes. The silence that followed was suffocating. When he finally looked at her again, tears were streaming down her face, but her expression remained composed, almost frighteningly calm. "Do you love her?" He opened his mouth to say yes, to justify everything, but the word wouldn't form. Because standing there, looking at Sophia carrying his child, he realized he didn't know what love meant anymore. Was it the intoxication he felt with Victoria, the validation and excitement? Or was it what he'd had with Sophia before success had poisoned him, the quiet certainty that someone saw him fully and loved him anyway? "I don't know," he admitted. Sophia nodded slowly, wiping her tears. "At least that's honest." She moved to the couch and sat carefully, her hand never leaving her stomach. "I won't trap you, Marcus. If you want the divorce, we'll do it. I'll raise this baby on my own. I grew up without much money, and I turned out fine. This child will be loved, I promise you that. They'll have everything that actually matters." The implicit accusation stung because it was true. Somewhere in his pursuit of everything, he'd lost sight of what mattered. But pride and confusion kept him silent. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia's voice was soft. "When did I become not enough?" "Because I remember being enough once. I remember you saying I was the best thing that ever happened to you." "What changed? Was it really me, or was it you?" Marcus sank into the chair across from her, suddenly exhausted. "Everything changed. The business, the money, the people, the expectations. You stayed the same, and that was my failure." "No, yes, I don't know." He ran his hands through his hair. "You're still the same person I married, Sophia. Kind, genuine, content with simple things. But I'm not that person anymore. I've become someone who wants more, who needs more. We don't fit together anymore. Because I won't change who I am to match your bank account." "That's not fair, isn't it?" She leaned forward. "Tell me, Marcus, when's the last time you were actually happy? Not successful, not powerful, not impressive, but genuinely happy. Because I remember you being happy in our old apartment with cheap wine and takeout pizza. I don't remember seeing you happy once since we moved here." He wanted to argue, but he couldn't. The truth was, he couldn't remember the last time he'd felt anything beyond the temporary high of a business victory or the shallow excitement of his affair. Everything else was just noise, ambition, and an endless hunger for more. "I saw your mother last week," Sophia said quietly. "She came to the house while you were in Tokyo." Marcus's head snapped up. What did she want? To tell me I should divorce you. To tell me I was never good enough for her son, and now that you'd made something of yourself, you deserved someone better. Sophia's laugh was bitter. She offered me money to leave quietly. $2 million to disappear. Rage flashed through him. She had no right. She's your mother, Marcus. She was protecting what she thinks are your best interests. Just like Victoria is probably telling you that I'm holding you back, that you deserve someone more ambitious, more sophisticated, more worthy of your success. Sophia met his eyes. But here's what neither of them understands. The man I fell in love with didn't measure worth in dollars or status. He measured it in kindness, in integrity, in whether you made the world a little better by being in it. That man was extraordinary. The man you've become. He's just rich. And there's a difference. The words landed like hammer blows, each one cracking the facade he'd built around himself. Because she was right. He'd spent the last 2 years becoming someone he didn't recognize, someone his younger self would have despised. He'd confused success with significance, wealth with worth. I don't know how to go back, he whispered. Maybe you can't. Maybe you've changed too much. Sophia stood slowly, walking toward him. But you could choose to move forward as someone different than who you've become. You could choose to be a father who teaches his child that people matter more than profit. That character matters more than charisma. That a rich life has nothing to do with money. And us. She was quiet for a long moment. I don't know if there's an us anymore, Marcus. You're right that we don't fit together the way we did. But maybe that's because one of us changed for the worse and the other refused to. The question is whether you think the person you've become is someone worth being. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. She was beautiful. Not in the polished way Victoria was beautiful, but in a deep, genuine way that no amount of money could buy or create. She was good, truly, fundamentally good, and he'd been willing to throw that away for what? Excitement, validation, the approval of people who didn't actually care about him. I've been so stupid, he said, his voice breaking. Yes, she agreed simply. You have been. I don't know if I can be who I was. I don't want who you were. I want someone better. Someone who learned something from all this. She placed her hand on her stomach again. This baby deserves a father who shows up. Really shows up. Not just financially but emotionally, spiritually. If you can't be that person, then yes, we should divorce. I won't raise my child around someone who teaches them that love is conditional and people are disposable. Marcus stood, closing the distance between them. He wanted to touch her, to hold her, but he'd lost that right. What do I do? That's not my decision. You have to figure out who you want to be, Marcus. The man who signs those divorce papers and walks away to his exciting new life. Or someone else entirely. But understand this. If you choose to stay, it's not about going back to how things were. We'd have to build something new, something honest. No more late nights with assistants. No more choosing ambition over family. No more measuring your worth by your net worth. He thought about Victoria, waiting for his call to celebrate their freedom. He thought about his business associates who'd mock him for staying with his simple wife. He thought about his mother's disappointment. And then he thought about his child, growing inside Sophia, who would someday ask what kind of man their father was. The choice suddenly seemed obvious, though terrifying. I'm going to need help, he said. Therapy. Real work on myself. Because I don't trust who I've become. I know. And I don't know if I can ever make up for what I've done to you. You can't. But you could start making different choices from this moment forward. Marcus knelt down, looking up at her through tears he didn't try to hide. I'm sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. For everything. For becoming someone you couldn't recognize. For betraying you. For almost throwing away the only real thing I've ever had. Sophia's hand touched his head gently. I know. Can we try? Can we build something new? I don't know. But maybe we can start by being honest. By you figuring out who you are without the money and success defining you. By both of us deciding if we want to be partners or just parents. She paused. And by you ending whatever's happening with her. Today. Now. If there's any chance for us, that ends immediately. Marcus pulled out his phone and, with Sophia watching, called Victoria. The conversation was brief and brutal. Victoria's anger meant nothing compared to the look of cautious hope on Sophia's face. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Marcus moved into the guest room that night, understanding that forgiveness would be earned slowly, if it came at all. He started therapy the next week, began attending fewer networking events and more of Sophia's community center activities. He sold one of the cars and donated the money to her shelter. Small steps, but deliberate ones. 6 months later, when their daughter Emma was born, Marcus held her in the hospital room and felt something he hadn't felt in years: complete. Not because of any achievement or acquisition, but because of love. Simple, powerful, real love. Sophia watched him with Emma, and while their marriage was still healing, still uncertain, there was something new between them: possibility. The chance to build a life based not on what they had but on who they chose to be. "Thank you," Marcus whispered to Sophia over their sleeping daughter. "For what? For freezing my world when I needed it frozen. For making me look at what I was about to lose." She smiled, tired but genuine. "Thank you for choosing to look." They had a long way to go. But for the first time in years, Marcus Wellington understood what wealth really meant. It wasn't in his bank account or his penthouse or his business empire. It was in this room, in this moment, in the terrifying and beautiful chance to be better than he'd been. And that, he finally realized, was worth more than everything he'd almost thrown away.